Welcome guests into your party or event with this stunning floral flower box welcome sign. To make it, you'll need 3 foam boards that are 30 inches long by 20 inches wide. When purchasing the foam boards, do your best to find boards that don't have dinged up corners or edges. To build the box, you're going to need a couple tools, including a self-healing cutting mat, a ruler or straight edge, I like these clear sewing rulers, a craft knife with a brand new blade in it so that it's nice and sharp, a pencil, and a hot glue gun with extra glue sticks. I'm going to take my first foam board and shorten it by 6 inches so that the overall length is 24 inches long by 20 inches wide. If one of your boards happens to have a damaged corner, this is a great opportunity to cut that off. With the ruler in place, I'm going to make a shallow cut, only cutting through that top layer of paper and about halfway through that foam, making sure I keep the knife nice and vertical and pressed solidly against the edge of the ruler. Then I'm going to take a second pass, cutting completely through the foam board. Sometimes when trying to cut foam board in one pass, it'll bunch up and rip the foam. So I use this method to get a nice clean edge on all of my cuts. I'm going to shorten a second foam board to the exact same size so they're both 20 by 24 inches. Then onto one of those boards, I'm going to draw the frame for the front of our box. The top and sides are 2 inches wide, so I'm going to use my ruler to count in 2 inches and then make a line that's 2 inches wide and stop 2 inches before the end. Then I'm going to rotate it, and on the long sides, I'm going to make another mark 2 inches in, but for this one, I'm going to count 10 inches up from the bottom before I start making my pencil mark. This large 10-inch section at the bottom of the sign is where we'll be able to apply vinyl lettering later on. With the rectangle penciled onto the front of my board, I can now cut it out with my craft knife. I'm going to use the edge of the ruler to help guide my knife for nice straight cuts. The most important part of these cuts are the corners, so make sure when you start your cut, you're putting the very tip of the knife into the corner, pulling it along to make your 2 cuts, but make sure when you get to the end of your cut, the knife doesn't cross over the pencil line, as that will be cutting into our finished frame. Pull the knife out a little shy of that line and then flip it around and poke the tip down into the corner and pull the knife back in the opposite direction. Do this for all 4 sides and you'll have nice crisp corners for the front of our welcome sign. From that third foam board, I'm going to cut 2 sides for the box that are both 24 inches long by 3 inches wide. Now for the top and bottom sides of the box, these will sit inside the 2 sides we just cut, and so that measurement will be affected by the thickness of the foam board you're using. So I'm going to take that 6 by 20 inch piece that we cut off the bottom of one of our boards and take the 2 sides that we just cut, put them together and align them with the very end of that board. Make a pencil mark against the foam board, and that will mean this board is now the perfect length to sit inside the box. I'm going to cut along the pencil line and then cut this board in half so it's 3 inches wide, and it'll give me 2 pieces, one for the top and one for the bottom of the box. Now I'm going to hot glue the long side to the back piece of the box. I'm going to put a couple tiny dots of hot glue along the edge of the side piece, just enough to tack it in place, and then I'll come back and reinforce it. This will reduce the amount of squeeze out that might happen on the outside of the box, which I want to keep as pristine as possible. This also gives me the flexibility to align the edges of those boards perfectly without swimming in a pool of hot glue. I'm going to hold this in place until the hot glue dries, and then attach the other long side next in the exact same way before attaching the top and bottom. Place a couple dots of glue along the edges and align these just on the inside of both of those long side pieces, making sure all of my edges are nice and flush, and then attaching the bottom piece in the exact same way. With the box loosely tacked in place, I'm going to go along and reinforce all the corners with a steady bead of hot glue across the entire length of all the inside seams. This includes pulling glue up into all the corners and then holding those corners in place to make sure they're nice and square. If you'd like to paint your sign, now is the perfect time to do that, as it'll be much easier to paint the inside of the box before the front is attached. I'll be leaving my sign white, so I'm going to move on to adding the dry floral foam. There's 2 types of foam, wet foam for fresh flowers and dry foam for silk or faux flowers. I'm going to secure 2 blocks just below the 10-inch mark of our box, that way it's hidden by the front of our sign. I'm only using a small amount of hot glue to secure these bricks down in case later on I want to remove them if they get worn out after multiple uses of this sign. Now it's time to glue the front to the rest of our box. Because the lower portion of the box is so deep, we won't be able to reinforce the inside edge like we did on the back, so I'm going to put several dots of hot glue all along the bottom edge of the box, moving quickly so that the hot glue doesn't dry before I can get the front on. orient that front piece so that the wide section is covering up the foam blocks, taking care to align all of the edges along the bottom and corner. Then gently press down on it and hold it in place until that hot glue dries. Next, I'm gently going to lift up the top edge of the box and put a couple dots of hot glue to tack it down in place before coating all the seams you can reach with a bead of hot glue. With our box built, it's time to add some gorgeous flowers. I'm using this bright colored assortment, but choose any flowers that work with your color scheme. When adding flowers to the box, there's two approaches you can take. You can either keep all of the flowers within the cutout of the box, or you can have your flowers extend beyond the box for a more dramatic look. I'll be taking the second approach where they extend beyond the box. Starting with my tallest stems, I'm going to insert the end of that stem into the foam block near the back of my box. That way I'll have enough room for my shorter flowers, which will be near the front of the design. I highly recommend using faux flowers for the foam board version of this sign. If you'd like to use fresh flowers, you'll need to build your box out of a thin plywood instead, or you need to completely seal the foam board because the moisture of fresh flowers will warp the foam board in this unpainted state. If your flower stems are too long for where you want to place it in the design, you can either cut off the end with a pair of wire cutters, or you can bend the stem up before inserting it into the floral foam. I wanted my box to be overflowing with bright colored flowers, so I'm using lots of faux floral stems. But no, you could use half as many flowers as I am and still have a gorgeous looking welcome sign. Once you're happy with the placement of the flowers, it's time to add the vinyl letters. I cut these out of black removable vinyl using my Cricut, and I'm going to apply this with 2-inch wide painter's tape to act as my transfer tape. Take your time when removing the paper backing and aligning it onto the sign. If you would like to reuse your flower box with different vinyl letters on it, I would recommend painting your box first, as the vinyl letters will be much easier to pull off the painted surface compared to the unpainted board. With the vinyl in place, we can now set our beautiful floral box sign on an easel to welcome our guests into our party or event space. If you enjoyed this project, you should check out this video. And until the next time, remember, stay creative, everybody!